There's a fire that happened at the ranch. Devon suffering from anxiety. And is Billy trying to get back with Phyllis? Stay tuned for this week's Restless Wrap.
You're tuned in to AFTERBUZZ TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Goodman here for another week of Restless Wrap. We've had a lot going on. We weren't here last week, so we kind of have a lot to touch up on. A lot of little tiny character storylines that we have going on. Feels like, especially this time of year with the holidays, they're kind of, we don't have a lot of crazy, busy things going on, but it feels like they're kind of revving it up for what's going to happen either near the end of the year or into the new year to 2019, which I can't believe is only a couple weeks away now. Okay, well, not just a couple, like 3 weeks away, but still. I just want to give a shout out to everybody that we have in the chat right now. We have Hubby Joe, Susan Russo, Doolaman, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more popping in here, and I will say your names as you come in. So let's go ahead and get started. Doolaman says, hey everybody. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. One thing I want to mention though, and this is kind of has nothing to do with this week's episodes. CBS, how I usually watch the show is we have our DVR and we record them and then we go back and we actually watch what they air on the station CBS Live. So this week, I thought it was worth mentioning, they actually did what they considered a Y&R classic throwback. And so just to kind of highlight, this isn't something we normally do on the show, but because they showed it on CBS, to kind of highlight, a throwback, which I think it was only maybe like 5 years ago that this show came out, but it was the episode where Nick ends up in the cabin all alone and he's confronted by various ex-girlfriends. We had Avery, we had Phyllis come by, we had some appearances by Sharon, and it was all like apparition, like they weren't real. It was some kind of dream sequence that he was having as Nick is on his quest discovering whether or not love is ever going to be real for him. And that seemed to be what the character arc was at the moment, which was hilarious kind of to me because of everything happening with Nick right now. It was interesting yet again to see another storyline where Nick and Sharon break up and he's dealing with, okay, well, this is the love of my life, but look at all these other women that I've been with and that I've hurt or have hurt me. So it was just an interesting episode to see in the middle of what we have going on right now with Nick living with Phyllis after the wedding was called off with Sharon. I was just curious to see that and to actually get a glimpse of different throwbacks and different flashbacks to Nick as a kid and as a young adult going through all these relationships and but sometimes hurting people or making these mistakes, and that it all ended with him with his daughters. And that was kind of the moral of that storyline, was that even if he can't find love in his girlfriends, that he could still find it in his daughters. So on that note, let's jump in to the episodes that we had this week after doing that kind of throwback there. Let's start with Devon and his storyline. We had a lot these last couple of weeks with him. We've had Nate and Kane and even Shauna, who have been very concerned for Devon after everything that's happening. My biggest complaint, though, I understand they care about him, and I understand that they're worried because he's been acting kind of strangely and just exhibiting these behaviors, especially with Shauna, where she ends up telling Anna, the other Devon's other sister, who's come back into the picture at this point. Shauna ends up telling Anna that Devon comes in and out. Sometimes there are people there. Sometimes it's like she feels kind of threatened by these people, especially because, as we now know, Shauna has had a situation with her own brother who was into drugs. So they're starting to think, okay, well, what's going on? They don't know what's going on with Devon. They just know that every time, they just know that he's been coming in and out a lot. We weren't really seeing physical signs of what Devon was doing until later on. But at first, it was just kind of like Devon coming in and out. You didn't see anything with his eyes. You didn't see anything with his behavior being off. Not at first. As the storyline progressed, we end up seeing that it kind of comes to a head. Shauna, as this is all going on, she ends up moving back to Colorado because of the situation, because of how she's feeling. Of course, Devon thinks everyone's overreacting. He thinks that Kane talked Shauna into leaving and not that Shauna wanted to leave. Like, Devon's just in a very fragile place, and all these people, including Anna, are just there to help him and get him back on the right track, but they're also kind of being pushy about it in one way. Just as a side note too, with Shauna, Charlie, of course, is dating Shauna still. He asked Kane if Shauna could come back and live with them if things don't work out in Colorado, but Kane was like, "No, we really can't do that." So it was hard to see Shauna leave Devon. It was hard to see Shauna leave Charlie. It was hard to see this person that was in Devon's life, who Hillary asked him to take care of, who leave his life. So that had a lot of different emotions attached to it, but I'm hoping that one day when Devon's in a better place, maybe Shauna can come back in and move in and live with him again. So then we start to see that Devon is starting to struggle. We saw a conversation he had with Abby where he could barely, he was falling asleep, and just Anna finds him kind of hanging out with sketchy people. So it just, all these things do start happening that kind of give hints away that, yeah, okay, Devon is there is a problem. One of the things too, and I think this is right before Shauna left, was that they had found drugs in the apartment. They weren't sure who had the drugs. Devon blames it on someone who was probably over at his house. So he doesn't really, he tries to play it off like that. They thought at first maybe it was Shauna, and by they I mean Kane, but it turns out they never really officially find out who the drugs belong to, but that's kind of what set things in motion. So as this whole thing is unraveling, we end up seeing Devon. He's falling asleep. He tries to get in his house one day, and as he's trying to get in, he can barely get the keys into the doorway. He's hungover. Nate happens to see this and goes in with him, and they make him some kind of weird smoothie. I don't even know. It looked like they put. I mean, Nate said what was in it. It was seaweed, raw egg, a bunch of really gross things. As Devon was drinking it, I was like, I wonder what's actually in that. It's probably kiwi and all kinds of green fruits that gave it that hue. Because Devon drank that thing way too fast for it to be gross. Now, obviously, there are some people who drink things super fast just because they want to get it over and done with. But me personally, if someone said that there were raw eggs and seaweed and other random gross things, I wouldn't be able to drink that concoction. I would just be like, yeah, give me 2 Tylenol and let me sleep. But he, Devon takes it. He starts to feel better. It's kind of around this time when Nate and Anna, they convince Devon that he should go see a therapist, more of Anna than Nate. And it kind of feels like, it makes sense too, that Anna is the sister and Devon would listen to her over Nate. So it's more Anna that convinces him to go to therapy. When Devon gets to the therapist, I was actually pleasantly surprised. That therapist, number one, when Devon said what was going on and told the therapist about the situation, that therapist said, yeah, well, I can understand how dealing with that family would make you feel, considering they're making you feel, it must be frustrated that they're treating you this way. And that therapist was very empathetic. And definitely, it felt like the right person that Devon needed to talk to. There was pushback, though, as Devon started talking to him, the therapist said something along the lines of, well, Devon said he lost his wife and child, and the therapist says, I'm so sorry. Can you tell me how you've been with that? I don't think Devon took it the wrong way, but I was like, how you've been with that? How do you think that a man or that a person is going to be when they lose someone like that? How do you think that would feel? So just the way the therapist worded the question, I was like, okay, that's a little odd. But Devon kind of just lets it go and answers. And by the end of the therapy session, the the therapist was pushing some kind of like anxiety pills and just something to help him get through the pain that he's feeling. And on the one hand, so the pushback was that Devon was sort of like, well, I don't know about taking medication or pills. He doesn't want to get addicted to anything. Like, he's kind of hesitant to go down that path. Now, what I'm thinking is, all right, when they prescribe you things, I mean, if it's really, first of all, I don't know. To me, it felt like the therapist was very quick to just say, well, we can prescribe this for you. I don't know. That seems like on the first visit, a very rushed thing to assess and say that someone that you've just seen, you instantly think, oh, well, they need this. Not that the therapist was going to make him take it. Obviously, he couldn't do that, but he just seemed to push it a little bit. And then obviously Devon went out and got the prescription. And I guess good thing he did, because all of a sudden later on when Rebecca shows up, when he's, I guess she's basically there so that Devon can pitch one of his musicians, Renee, to her. And that turns into a mess because Renee isn't there and Rebecca expected her to be. And Devon's like, okay, I don't know how to handle this right now. And eventually Anna came into the room and she diffused the situation. But as Anna's there talking to Rebecca, Devon starts to have a panic attack and holding his heart. At first, I thought it was so bad that it was a heart attack and that's what he was going through. But I wasn't sure. I started writing down, okay, this is either some kind of panic attack or he's having a heart attack. It wasn't really clear to me until he walked over. They had Rebecca sit down to listen to Renee's music, and then Anna took Devon over privately and said, hey, why don't you take the medicine? Yes, I know you have prescription pills now because I accidentally saw this documentation that when I was going through the drawers. Okay, that's a weird way to find out someone has pills, but I mean, okay, if that's what happened. But in the end, Devon, you could see he really didn't want to take them because he didn't want to become a pill. Like, I guess to him, he was worried that he would become addicted and that he would end up being addicted to these drugs, whatever it is. They didn't say, just that they're anti-anxiety pills. Could be a lot of different things, I guess. But in any case, what ends up happening is Devon takes them, and then like 5 or 10 minutes later, he comes back and he's no longer having these flashes of anxiety. So I guess obviously they worked. Obviously it's helping. I don't know where they're going with this. If they're going to show Devon heading down a really dark path, for him to be that worried that he's going to get addicted, obviously because there's family history. To me, it's almost like they're trying to foreshadow that he's going to go down a darker path. That's actually where I thought Devon was headed when Anna and Kane and Nate, when they were all worried about him. I kind of thought but that they suspected, that's the better word, that he was doing drugs and not just alcohol. Not that it wasn't possible for him to have an alcohol, not that it isn't possible for him to have a problem with alcohol, but it kind of felt like they thought maybe he was doing hard drugs, and that was where this was going, and that the drugs they found were going to be Devon's. But then the way that Devon reacted when the therapist pushed pills, okay, so obviously he's not doing drugs. And obviously the only thing that he's really doing right now is just drinking too much. Or maybe he wasn't drinking too much at all. Maybe he was just going out and he came over and he was, still a little drunk the next day. It happens to adults sometimes. But I think it's, regardless of whether he has an alcohol problem, it's obvious that he had a problem. But what problem is the real question? Is it just that it could just be that he's still grieving over Hillary and his child, and that he's just going through a lot, and then getting out and being with strangers who don't know what happened doesn't mean that he's drinking and getting drunk or doing drugs. It could just be that he just gets out, and that, okay, sometimes he drinks, but we don't really know the extent of this yet. We just know that the behaviors he's starting to exhibit are clearly of a person who is grieving and damaged and doesn't know how to handle the emotions they're feeling. But we don't really know specifically what he's doing when he's out yet, because we don't see too much of that. And when we do see him with people, like when his family has found him, he seems to be acting kind of normal, just, very hurt. So let's check in with the chat here and see what's going on. Okay, so Simone Francois says, I think Ian Ward's crazy. He's the one behind this. He and JT could be working together. Okay, so we're definitely going to get into the JT storyline, which I can't believe is still going on, but it is. But we'll get to that in a second. And we have Newman saying Tessa works for him. He sent her to mess with Mariah. Okay, we'll definitely get to this. We can talk about this after we're done with the Devon segment. Newman says Shauna will be back. I think Anna is Nate's storyline. Yawn. That's interesting. Tubby Joe says all the writing has been off. Doolman agrees. Doolman, right, Rachel, too rushed to give a prescription. Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that wouldn't have been something that would come up in conversation, but the way that, to me, the way that Devon's acting, we have seen some of his behavior definitely off, but the way that he acted in that therapy session, as a viewer, I didn't think he acted off enough for someone to prescribe medications. Not at that point. It'd be one thing if it was like a couple of visits and Devon was really letting things out a little bit more, and maybe the therapist was seeing certain things come out, or maybe Devon was telling him more about how he was feeling and then the therapist decided. But from one session, I don't think that unless it's a terrible case and you're really showing the therapist that you need something to help you, I don't know that they would just prescribe that like that. Okay, and we had a question about Rebecca, the actress playing her. Doolman says Rebecca looks very familiar. Does anyone know the actress? Sam Pabone says her name is Jennifer Taylor from 2.5 Men. Her character is Charlie Sheen's girlfriend. Okay, she looked familiar to me too, so that makes sense. I watched 2.5 Men, so that explains it. Hubby Joe, Jennifer Taylor is playing corporate bigwig Rebecca Barlow on The Young and the Restless. Taylor, who's known for a role as Chelsea on 2.5 Men, as well as for her stint on Shameless. Okay, so now we know. All right, so before we continue, I just want to talk to you guys. Obviously, you're a big fan of Young and the Restless, but just so you know, our network actually produces after shows for nearly all of your favorite TV shows. From dramas, reality TV, sci-fi, and more, there's no network that works harder to serve television fans. But we need your help. We're asking that you please subscribe to one or more of our YouTube channels. By subscribing to our channel, YouTube will suggest content that's tailor-made for you, and you'll help AfterBuzz continue to grow. So, go ahead and subscribe now. Don't worry about those pesky notifications because you can turn them off. So hit that subscribe button and then let us know that you did, and I will give you a shout out live on the air. So thank you for now for being the best fans and for helping us to be the ESPN of TV talk. Speaking of talking, if you are listening live right now on December 9th, 2018 at 5:27 p.m., we're taking live calls, so that number to dial is 424-354-8302. Again, if you're listening live on December 9th and you'd like to be on the show, you can call in at 424-354-8302. It is 5:27 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I didn't say that before, so just specifying I am in California. So if it's 8:30 right now for you, you can still call in because, 8:30 and it's Eastern Time. Go ahead and call in. Okay, so let's go ahead and move along to the next storyline. We had a lot of things. All right, just real briefly, this isn't such a huge thing that happened, but it was earlier on in the week. Just to kind of touch base on everything happening with Mia and Ray. Just real quickly, she had a networking party, and Sharon ended up Sharon ended up going. She didn't really want to, but she was kind of roped in because Nikki, Phyllis, and Victoria thought it would be appropriate for them to mingle with Ray's wife and get information about the case, and that was their plan. So they end up all going. Sharon is very awkwardly there and tries to be nice. Nikki, I thought this didn't make it to the law moment, but it almost did. Nikki, she gets to the party, right? And if this is what they're trying to do, if they're trying to just kind of casually, ask about this case, it should have been a casual thing. Like, don't make yourself obvious. Nikki literally gets there, and then almost a moment later, she's like, she starts talking to Mia, and she goes, "Hey, so what's going on with the case? Is it closed? What's going on? What a shame. Blah, 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 blah." Can you be any more obvious that you're only there to get information about this case? It was just very, like, just the look on Nikki's face, the way she sounded, the fact that it was the first thing she asked, like, way to have, like, a smooth move into that conversation. And by smooth, I mean not smooth at all. That was just so obvious. Todd Beaton says, no Sharon and Ray together. I'm guessing Todd doesn't want them together. See, the thing is that as we kind of saw from this networking party, Sharon gets into a little bit of an altercation with Mia, who I felt like Mia, that was another thing. Mia was really like over the top trying to be like the host of this party. And it just kind of felt like forced and fake. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of Mia, though, as we're learning. It's just a very fake, like, okay, what can I do to like get this to work in my favor kind of thing. So in any case, and one of the latest scenes, or one of the last scenes, that is with Sharon, well, with Nikki complaining about Ray's working hours and how he's never around. And then Sharon basically defends Ray, and then she gets into a little fight with Mia, and then Sharon storms out. She's like, all right, I can't do this. So she leaves, and then she and Ray end up meeting down in Crimson Lights right below. And as they're talking, basically Ray admits that part of the problem for him is he can't go into bed with his wife because he's still thinking about Sharon. And that's it, is that he doesn't directly say her name. He says thinking about someone else, but it's very obvious he's talking about her. They almost kiss again, but then as they're about to almost kiss, Mia's walking the rest of the party down because everyone's leaving. And as she is kind of stepping in, as the kiss is about to happen, Mia steps in, she takes her husband away and like basically places a kiss on his lips and takes him back upstairs. So that's, I mean, it's such a mess what's going on with them right now. But that's kind of where they kind of left it with the two of them, and that things with Sharon and Ray seem to be kind of heating up in the sense, like not actually happening, but their feelings seem to be still developing. Like, okay, they want to be together, which is going to be interesting because everything going on with this murder mystery, not that it's a mystery to us, but everything that's going on with it is going to eventually implicate Sharon. She's involved with it when the truth comes out, because we all know it will. I'm wondering what's going to happen with this, with everything with Ray and Sharon. And then the other thing is that they're not going to send all four of them to jail because those are, these are such main characters. So I don't know. I'm curious how they're going to handle this. Todd Beaton, Nikki, Sharon, Victoria, and Phyllis will not get in trouble. Yeah, it will be hard for them to get in trouble unless the show plans on creating a permanent jail set, because these are like the top people in this show. One of the top people, not all of them, but like these are like a huge group, and you'd be cutting out so many people. So Hubby Joe says Mia needs to go. Yeah, I like that she brings on this conflict, though. Like, she's a really good bad character to have. Speaking of, like, just as a very passing thought, Summer has left. So I know some people in the chat are probably going to be cheering about that, but Summer has actually gone to Dubai to work under Victor, which was a whole other point of tension between Phyllis and Nick, and kind of Victor and Nikki. But yeah, she is gone, and I thought that was a mistake because Summer, maybe it's because they didn't know what to do with her anymore, but she was a really good character for conflict as well, in a different way than Mia, but definitely good with conflict. But that being said, let's go back into the JT storyline. Well, if we're even still calling it that, I know it's all about JT, but it kind of the big thing this week was the fire at the ranch. That's kind of what set things in motion with that. Nikki and Victoria get this call, there's a fire. They don't know what started it. Ray pops into the car as they get there to see the fire and tells them they can't go to the to the ranch. They can't go to the ranch at all. They can't go to the house. They can't go to the stables. The stables is what actually was burned. Apparently, they didn't mention any animals being harmed, so it sounds like they got all of the horses out. But yeah, the whole thing burned down. And then Ray kind of creepily popped into their backseat of the car and was like, yeah, you guys can't stay here. P.S. You need to leave. So that was kind of, it kind of was random that he just jumped in the car like that. But he jumped in, told them to leave. Nikki ends up going to Victoria's. As this is all happening, they can't get a hold of Victor. They kind of heard from him earlier on, especially when Nikki was talking about summer and getting a job there. We've seen Victor a couple times in the last couple of weeks, like just over conference, but he has been away. So we haven't actually had much of a storyline with him, just from off screen and mention. So that's basically all we heard from him. And now every time Nikki tries to call him, the number it's been disconnected is what she keeps getting. And then she emailed him and she said that the email bounced back. So that's kind of an odd thing that's happening. I don't know why. My guess as to, I don't know why it would be bouncing. That's what didn't make sense to me. Unless they went in and I don't know. We'll just leave that where it is for now, because I don't know how to explain that one or how to make sense of it in my head. But in terms of, we don't know where he is. My guess would be that either JT's still alive or this whole thing. Here's the thing with Nick. We know Nick's capable of doing sneaky things, especially after, the whole creation of Dark Horse. I wouldn't be surprised if we turn out this whole thing has been one big move from Nick, and that not that he wants to hurt, any of the women involved, because obviously these are all women that he cares about in different ways. But maybe we're going to find out that Nick is somehow involved in this, and he's been doing things to just kind of assert his power and just to kind of, maybe he has his own weird reasoning for why he would go about doing it this way. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out Nick had more to do with all of this than what we would think. Because I think the first reaction is to think, okay, well, Victor's probably planting all these things and making it look a certain way, and now he's in hiding, and maybe Victor knows what's going on. It would make sense that Victor would know, but I'm also wondering too if maybe it's Nick, and maybe that's who is kind of doing all this in the shadows. Hubby Joe says, JT is alive and kidnapped Victor. He hacked the computer servers and erased Victor's email accounts and disconnected his phone. Yeah, that's one theory. That does sound about right. Chad Beaton, JT will be alive. Duelman, JT's probably not dead. Hubby Joe, how does a bloody shirt not burn up in a fire that big? Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's kind of what ends up happening, is that this fire happens. Ray ends up calling in Nikki and Victoria he calls them in for questioning. And when he calls them in, Nick's there first, and in front of Nick, he doesn't reveal any of this evidence. He just tries to blame Victor. And then Nick leaves and he's like, nope, my family we didn't do this fire. It wasn't our fault, blah, blah, blah. And then Nick says, all right, well, I'm not going to talk to him unless I get a lawyer. And I suggest that the two of you don't do that either. And then he leaves, goes wherever. And then Ray says, all right, well, I have a couple questions for you, Nikki and Victoria. And they don't get their lawyer. They just stand there, and then they're like, okay, cool, you can ask us questions, after he brings out the evidence, which is that bloody shirt, and which apparently was, they identified the DNA as being JT's, and then there was a gun. Now, my first question is, and maybe I missed this, okay, you find a gun. Guns are usually registered, or they're supposed to be, and I would imagine you could somehow trace it. So he didn't say it was registered. He just brought out a gun in a bag and plopped it down there and was like, yep. So do you guys know this gun? Is it yours? And it just was very, I don't know, it just didn't make sense to me that Ray wouldn't have done more to kind of see where that gun had come from, to see if it was registered, to even if he was going to tell, he should, if it wasn't registered, you would think that maybe he would at least have hinted toward that. I don't know. It didn't seem right to me. It seemed kind of off. So we have another comment here. Todd says actually maybe Kyle's the one involved. It Could be, definitely. Simone, either Victor is doing this or JT is still alive and working with some other Genoa City crazy person. And we also have Tessa. Now, we know what happened to her at the end of the week, so I won't give that away right now. But Duleman, I'm liking this Ian Ward thing. Yeah, well, I'm curious. I'm thinking just from the fact that it's the holidays, we're probably not gonna know much until January, is my guess, just because they probably assume it's quieter, and they just a guess, maybe more is going to happen in December. But Todd Beaton says Kyle could be doing the hate Nikki for killing his mom. He does care about Sharon and Victoria and get Phyllis out of Jabot. Yeah, definitely. I could see Kyle being a part of this too. Okay, so we kind of ended that with Ray asking them, just kind of questioning them about everything. And then we kind of get back to Victoria's house, and Sharon ends up coming there and says that she thinks it's Phyllis. And I just kind of wanted to mention that because, I don't know, that seems a little left field to me, and that obviously Sharon would only say that because she's very angry with Phyllis considering everything. So to kind of tie in with that, let's kind of talk about Tessa and Mariah, because they had a lot to do. They're kind of, as we know, they're kind of connected to the storyline just because of everything with Tessa. I don't think this was this week. I think it was the week before, but we didn't talk about this yet. Victoria ends up confronting Tessa and basically telling her, like, you're not going to mess with my family. You're not going to go and do this. I will run you out of Genoa City. And then Victoria ends up finding the bear with the money and the extra hard drive, or the extra flash drive, that is, not hard drive. The extra flash drive with, the probably more footage of the same thing. Now, the thing we don't know is, would Tessa have been dumb enough to not have made extra backups? And is there a computer file that is on her computer somewhere, or does she have a flash drive in her car, or like in a drawer? We don't know. Like, Victoria, it seemed too easy. Okay, she got the money back. The problem is, either Victoria doesn't understand how this works. She should, but to just think, okay, well, that's it. I have them all now. Like, there couldn't possibly be any other backup of this footage. I think that's a silly thing to think, considering Tessa could have this all over the place, and it could already have been sent to people. It was already sent to them. That's another thing to consider. It was not the full thing, but the piece of it, anyway, was kind of emailed to the 4 women. So if Tessa emailed that portion, she could have definitely emailed the rest of the files to herself, so that she wouldn't have to worry about someone crashing, or taking her physical copies of it. So Victoria thinks that she can go talk to Tessa and then brush this under the rug. I don't think so. I don't think it's over yet. And obviously, Mariah and Tessa are on really rocky, it's just a very rocky situation for them right now, because they just don't, there's no trust. Tessa keeps lying to Mariah. Tessa told Mariah there was no more footage, and there was. And now Tessa knows that, after Victoria came to visit, Tessa knows that Mariah told Sharon who it was. So it kind of pisses me off, though, with Tessa, because when she found out that Mariah gave her name to Sharon, she was like, well, how could you betray my trust? How could you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Tessa, you're one to talk. That is just the most ridiculous thing ever for you to be mad about this, considering everything you've done to her. So that was kind of where they sort of ended up at this point. Mariah goes to talk to Kyle about it, and even though she doesn't tell him specifics, but it's kind of back and forth, and Mariah says, well, I just don't know if anyone else would ever love me. So I don't know. I'm getting to a point where I just think Tessa uses everyone, and that I don't think that she has real feelings for Mariah at all, and it just needs to end. It just needs to be over, done. And then Tessa needs to leave. I think we have a couple people who agree with me on that. So Susan Russo, I do like how Victoria took down Tessa. I like that she did it, but I just think it was kind of foolish that Victoria would think, oh, I found this other flash drive. We're good. This footage isn't anywhere else. Tessa can't implicate us. Duleman, or it could actually be Phyllis. It could be. It could be, but I don't know. I'm thinking I'm thinking it's not, but it definitely could be. Not to throw your theory out. Hubby Joe, Victoria acted just like Victor when she went to Tessa. Yeah, that was definitely true. So true. She definitely did. It just wasn't. Yeah, just that whole flash drive thing. I have a problem with that because we don't know how many people. Like, obviously, here's the thing. Obviously, Tessa is working with someone. You can't trust a word she says. That's, if anything, we've learned this about her. She lies. She's a good actress. She will tell you something and look like, how could you not believe her? But that's just how could you not believe that she's telling the truth? Look how sad she looks about it. Look how look how much conviction she gives what she's saying. But if anything, we know now Tessa will lie about anything and sound like she's telling the truth, but it's not the truth necessarily. So when she says that she doesn't know what happened to the body, I am thinking she probably does, or she's somehow connected with someone else, and there's more to the story that Tessa knows that we don't know, and that we're going to eventually find out. I'm just wondering, too, if Zach will come back into the picture. Or sorry, not Zach. If we get anyone from the sex ring, I should say, not Zach. I misspoke on that. Any of the characters from the sex ring, if they're going to come back and step back into the picture, and we're going to find out that Tessa's still dealing with them, and that we don't even know what happened to Crystal, really, just that Tessa has to go help her sometimes. Okay, we have another comment. Hubby Joe, I am liking Kyle more and more. The way he talked to Mariah in the coffee house was awesome. He's a good friend of Mariah. I like Kyle with Lola. Okay, so let's kind of segue a little bit then before we get to our law moment. Just to wrap up everything going on with Tessa, Mariah was talking to Kyle near the very end of the week. We see Tessa leaving, and as she's leaving her apartment, someone puts a bag over her head and takes her. So my thought is it could be someone she's actually working with, and that they just wanted to take her away to a place where she wouldn't know where she was, so that she couldn't tell people where the secret hiding spot was, one of those situations, and that she's gonna that she's gonna arrive at this place, and we're gonna find out, oh, okay, it's it's her it's like some good colleague that she works with, that they're conspiring against the Newmans, and this is what's happening. And it could end up being even Nick, or like whoever's involved in this whole JT thing, whoever is behind it. So in any case, that kind of wraps up everything with Tessa this week. Speaking of Kyle, though, we had a little situation with Fenmore, and this is my first week meeting Fenmore, which I think is hilarious that his name is Fenmore. And that I love how Ted was like, well, your name's not Fenmore, is it? That would have been hilarious if I was going to name my child Fenmore because of my last name. And, if I was with someone and my last name was Fenmore and I was going to name my child Fenmore, you know what? Go all the way. Just make him Fenmore. But no, Fenmore Baldwin, I think they said his name was after Michael, not after Lauren. So, we met Fenmore this week, who they sometimes call Fen, who is back from law school. He's dropped out of law school. He wants to be a musician. So far, my impression of Fenmore, he is kind of a jerk. Like, I am not a fan of this guy. And we kind of see him, like, not necessarily the way he's talking to his parents, but the way that he comes back in and he's hitting on Lola, and just the way that he hits on her. And then later, after he finds out she has a boyfriend, right in front of Kyle, like, he doesn't know that Kyle's the boyfriend yet, but he tries to hit on Lola again, knowing she has a boyfriend. Lola responds by kissing Kyle, and then Fenmore still tries to hit on her and says something obnoxious like, oh, I'm gonna get you, it's just one of these days. Come on, like, get over yourself. And all Fenmore cares about is the dating scene. I mean, he's gonna be an interesting character to have there, but where's Summer? Because I could see Fenmore and Summer hitting it off really well. They both seem like they, might be good together. And hey, Fenmore's looking, so this was the wrong time for Summer to leave. Summer needs to be here now. And they could just do so much with that storyline. Hopefully she'll change her mind, especially with Victor not being there anymore. We don't know where he is. hopefully Summer will change her mind and come back, and we'll see her again, and she'll get some storyline with Fenmore. Yeah, Hubby Joe, big time jerk. Okay, so let's just see. One last thing to touch on really quickly is Billy and Phyllis. We had a scene with them, a couple little scenes, a couple of business scenes. And Billy suddenly, when they were talking to Rebecca, he felt like Phyllis and him had kind of hit it off like old times. I don't necessarily think he meant like romantically. At least I didn't take it that way at first. But then when he was talking to Sharon, he admitted he still cared for Phyllis. And then, meanwhile, Phyllis sends Nick to go and basically date Rebecca so that they can seal a deal with Jabot with her. And Billy ends up catching Nick and Rebecca out on this dinner date, and goes to talk to Phyllis about it. Like, hey, did you know that Nick's already cheating on you? And Phyllis is like, no, he's not cheating on me. I sent him, duh. And it was just really funny. And it's like, okay, Billy, you think that you ever could have a chance with Phyllis again? You hurt her. Like, it wasn't even like you cheated on her. You went with her daughter. I don't think Phyllis is ever going to be able to get over that, number one. Two, she's with Nick now, so sorry, Billy, too late. Plus, I want to see Billy and Sharon, I think, get together. I think that would be the ideal couple right now if Sharon is not going to be with Nick. Okay, a couple more comments, and then we'll get to our law moment. Let's see. Todd Beaton says Phyllis and Billy together, then Nick and Phyllis are together. Yeah. It doesn't, and then Hubby Joe says she was pimping Nick for Jabot. Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to our law moment. This came earlier during the networking scene or networking party that Mia had. This was, we had Esther there. And at the very end of the party, first of all, Esther kept trying to get Mia's attention, which I thought was funny. And Mia just really wasn't having it. Like, Esther was kind of there as like an extra person, it felt like. And Mia was trying to get Phyllis's attention or Victoria's attention for her makeup line and for her, not her makeup line, but just for her, the way that she applies makeup is kind of what I mean. But Esther at the very end of the night, like, Mia's like, oh, I'm going to pass out my business cards. And she starts passing them out. And then as an afterthought, not really an afterthought per se, but Esther basically has to not beg, but say, oh, I want a card. So Mia gives her the card. And the part that I thought was hilarious was Esther telling Mia that she had a networking event coming up with her bowling league, her ladies' bowling night. They needed someone to go and do their makeup. I thought that was hilarious. Okay, so let me just check in and see if there's any other comments before we wrap up for the day. Doolman, I miss the old Fenmore. I guess as a younger kid, he was different. But then again, Summer seems like she was a much different person too. I say that from the throwback episode they had where we saw Summer for a second. She seemed like a very different character. So I guess a lot of the kids end up changing. Hubby Joe, great writing, not. And then Susan Russo says, I would like to see Sharon and Billy too. Well, on that note, my name is Rachel Goodman, and you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Rach Goodman. We also have a Facebook group at Restless Rap. So if you go over there and like and follow, you'll always see the link to the show because I post it there. And if you have any comments and you leave them there, I will say them live on the air. Until next week, have a great week.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.
Just one look at